With how it is with Trump. It's like, don't do this to me, man. You get my hopes up and then you just do a 180.
Hmm.
So, actions speak louder than words. We had a lot of good words from Trump recently coming out of the Saudi Arabia trip. I
Right.
actually have it here. I think it'd be good just to play it and we can kind of take it from there and talk
Sure.
about this, this trip that he's doing throughout the Middle East.
And it's crucial for the wider world to note this great transformation has not come from Western interventionists or flying people in beautiful planes giving you lectures on how to live and how to govern your own affairs. No, the gleaming marvels of Riyadh and Abu Dhabi were not created by the so-called nation builders, neocons, or liberal nonprofits like those who spent trillions and trillions of dollars failing to develop Kabul, Baghdad, so many other cities. Instead, the birth of a modern Middle East has been brought by the people of the region themselves, the people that are right here, the people that have lived here all their lives, developing your own sovereign countries, pursuing your own unique visions and charting your own destinies in your own way. It's really incredible what you've done. In the end, the so-called nation builders wrecked far more nations than they built, and the interventionists were intervening in complex societies that they did not even understand themselves. They told you how to do it, but they had no idea how to do it themselves. Peace, prosperity, and progress ultimately came not from a radical rejection of your heritage, but rather from embracing your national traditions and embracing that same heritage that you love so dearly.
Yeah.
He almost sounds like he sounds like us.
Yeah, I know. It's quite extraordinary. I mean, it was a very, I think, almost, yeah, I think you could say an eloquent statement on behalf of multipolarity and a condemnation of, of the neocon way of doing things. It's quite extraordinary. I was going to say that maybe he's a closet, advocate of multipolarity, but there he is saying it out in the open. It's again, he'll do some things. I think probably the one really big blind spot is Israel and Zionism. That's and maybe that black spot, where he, is through Zionism he acts just as, maybe it's fair to say that he's not a neocon in the sense that he's trying to push the neocon ideology, but an out and outright imperialist. He supports, let's say, Israeli imperialism, Israeli domination, and that's the unfortunate exception. But I've said many times he's not a neocon, and I think that speech showed it better than anything else. He is an America firster, which in his mind means that he gets to bully other countries, and he's tried to do that, but he's finding that outside of his own hemisphere, it just doesn't work. Right? It hasn't worked against China. It didn't work against the Houthis. He's realizing it won't work against Iran, and so maybe he's slowly abandoning or temporary, I wouldn't say abandon, but becoming more realistic about America's power, and so this I think this latent belief in multipolarity that was always there. One thing is that unlike the neocons, who want to export the Western ideological revolution to the rest of the world and insist on everybody having basically the same system of government and the same social system. And you've never seen that. He doesn't make those kind of arguments. He bullies countries and whatever, but it's just a question of raw power. And then when he sees that, okay, this raw power, we don't really have it in the amounts that we thought we did, he becomes more realistic. Let's hope that trend continues.
Right. And we've said this before so many times, but it always seems like Trump seems to echo whoever he talked to last, that his mind changes quickly. But what I'm hoping for, what we're seeing is that with the expulsion of Mike Waltz, and we're hearing statements that he's shutting out APAC, that he's upset with them. So maybe he's been able to replace those Zionist, neocon war hawks in his administration with something more rational. And so you wonder who wrote this speech for him. Is this who has Trump's ear? Because that seems to be all important. Because if that person gets removed and
Yeah,
then we get a new Mike Waltz in there, then we'll be back to his speech like there'll be a bombings like we've never seen before. Because we had that type of rhetoric literally just weeks ago, months ago,
right.
that with threats to Iran and this,
Yeah.
and here he's
And we
talking about.
also, right, we're still getting these threats, like he's saying that, no, Iran shall not export its oil to any country in the world. It's got
Mhm.
to end entirely, not a drop. You're getting these kind of threats, but he's not carrying through on them. And it is less than, an all out bombing campaign. Um, so, yeah, I think that characterization of Trump that he echoes who he spoke to 10 minutes earlier. There's quite a bit of truth to that, but it's not entirely true. He does have, I think, a core orientation that you see, comes out again and again over the years. Like he clearly does. He clearly isn't a neocon, and I think you can see it through both actions, even when some of these actions are really terrible. But in his rhetoric, and not just the rhetoric of this that we heard in this speech, but over the course of years. And he's always favored tariffs, for example, and protectionism. That's something that goes years and years and years back. He does have some core beliefs, but they get, you know, because of, I think, a number of factors, often his failure to grasp the details of a situation, he gets talked into something. People understand that he has these attitudes. Let's just you give Russia and the Ukraine war as an example. Yeah, he really does want to end it. But he doesn't have a grasp of all the details, and he doesn't fully understand, what's happening in Russia. And he has some impressions. Some of them are accurate, some of them are inaccurate. But people who understand that about him and want to sabotage, any sort of peace between the U.S. and Russia will say, well, yeah, this is a great, we can make these negotiations succeed. But the way to do it is just to apply some more pressure to Russia. They just another package of sanctions, et cetera, et cetera. You have to escalate to de-escalate, meaning, and he. So I think sometimes, yeah, he falls for these tricks, and he does like to threaten. He likes to as we've seen again and again, to threaten that all hell will break loose. You're going to experience the fury of the United States Air Force, etc. He likes to say these words, and somebody can encourage to say, "This is actually going to be in service of your peace plan, President, if you do this," and he can fall for it. But it seems like he'll fall for these things, and he finds out they don't work, and then he kind of goes back to his core orientation, which is basically, we'll say multipolarism, but with the U.S. as the top dog. But again, he's starting to realize that the U.S. isn't as top a dog as he once believed.
Okay, well, let's dive into this Saudi Arabia trip right now. Just his trip in the Middle East. Well, what do you make of it so far? Do you feel like this is a historic trip, or are we reading too much into it?
um, well, okay, yeah. What I've heard is that some big deals were made there. The Saudis agreed to buy hundreds of billions of dollars worth of U.S. arms, and also to invest something like $600 billion in the U.S. economy, and Qatar and the UAE said similar things. So there's the businessmen are inking deals, or starting to work out the details and all this. And this is the kind of thing Trump likes to do. I think this is vintage Trump. I think he probably really loves it there because they're good at pomp and ceremony, and
Mm-hmm.
they're kings, and I think he would like to be a king.
Mm-hmm.
And the gift of the 747 is something that I think that really tickled him. This is So it's something, it tickles his own ego, but then it's also, he likes to be a deal maker. He's a businessman, and this is what he understands. And that's what he really thinks, that's the way countries should interact with each other. And I agree, that's a much better way to do it. To do things than to actually, launch wars. I don't think it seems clear to me, in spite of some of his actions, that he is not a warmonger. That's not his preferred course. That's not his natural instinct. He gets sometimes talked into it, but that's just not the way he wants to do things. He wants to, I think you're seeing, this is Trump doing what he wants to do. And he would love to be able to do that all around the world.
Yeah, I'm okay with that kind of Trump. Let him go around the world, talk to everybody, and try to work out deals. I think that's good to have communication.
Like 747s.
Yes, well, better than bombing countries, right? It's
right. Yeah, I mean, there is a whiff of corruption there, but I agree. I'd rather have a corrupt president, and maybe a very vain and and rather. Let's say
bombastic.
Yeah, bombastic president than an ideological zealot who might be very highly intelligent and as clean as the driven snow when it comes to his observance of procedure, but he's launching wars that lead to the deaths of hundreds of thousands. And give me the bombastic deal making president any day.
Right. So there are a couple of things that I've heard that I want to confirm if they're true or not. One is that there's going to be a normalizing of relations with Syria and a potential lifting of all sanctions on Syria. And it seems like, Al-Jilani, I don't understand. I guess was he going to be an interim leader, but now it seems like he's solidifying his position in Syria. Should we expect Al-Jilani really to be the new president of Syria long term, and that this is I don't know what to make of it, because he used to, he used to be an Al Qaeda ISIS guy. There was a $10 million bounty on him as a terrorist, and now he's
just a few months ago.
Right. And now we're making these deals with him, and it seems like he's got the backing of MSB and Erdogan. So what's going on here?
Yeah, well, I think he always had the backing of Erdogan and the Saudis and the Gulf states. I think.
Or MBS, that MSB. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Mohammed bin Salman.
Right.
Yeah. So he's always had their backing, and he's really basically now a puppet of Erdogan. I think as long as Erdogan wants to be there, he will be there. He's there because of Turkey's support for the jihadists there. I mean, I would say it's a good thing, that the sanctions are lifted. They should have been lifted a long time ago. They should have never been imposed. They were very cruel. They've caused a lot of misery in Israel. Not Israel, in Syria. A lot of misery in Syria. And I think we're to a great degree responsible for the fall of Assad. Okay, but now, I am obviously no supporter of Giuliani, but it's just regardless, the people are suffering. These sanctions should be lifted. Now, I don't know again, we have seen atrocities already. It's not like we haven't seen them go into full Al-Qaeda or ISIS mode, but there are those kind of people running around the country doing terrible things. And if you pay attention, there have been massacres. And just most recently, when I think like all the students left the university in Damascus, all the non-Sunni students, basically, the Alawites, the Christians, the Druze, and to return to their respective regions because they just don't feel safe. That gives you an idea of what's going on. There is, it's not kind of completely unrestrained sectarian violence. And it doesn't seem to be, maybe I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem to be systemic, being coordinated from the top. It's just that you have these bands of people that they are, takfiris. They do believe that anybody who doesn't adhere to their version of Sunni Islam is an infidel, and and should be subjugated, captured, or killed. And they are acting on that in different parts of the country. Not everywhere all the time, but that's what we're seeing. Um, Now it looks. I think the Israeli plan was clear from the start. They want to balkanize. This is what they've always wanted to do. Is just break up Syria, and they've taken steps. They've captured territory directly that they have under their direct control, but then they've extended a zone essentially, through all southern Syria, saying no, um, where they won't tolerate the presence of any significant Syrian forces. And then they declared themselves to be the protectors of the Druze. And again, it puts the Druze in a very difficult spot. It's just like, they don't love the Israelis. In fact, I remember going to the Golan Heights back there in what was 2011, and we visited a center there, and the Druze are the head of that organization. I forgot what it was called. He was a Druze, and he emphasized that we are Syrians. He said. Because, of course, at that time, until Trump's first term, that all the countries in the world, including the United States, recognized the Golan Heights as Syrian territory. And they just, they would show maps where, the Golan Heights, that we're part of Syria. This is our country. We want to return. The Israelis need to withdraw. But, of course, that hasn't happened. And the Assad's government fell. You have, a jihadist, maybe he is somewhat of a reformed jihadist. That's possible. I mean, people, as they get older, they can change their views, moderate them, but he still is clearly sectarian. And, the people on the ground, the many minorities in Syria do not feel safe now in places like Damascus, and are starting to move, to different areas of the country, would it be with their fellow co-religionists. Um, so yeah, so the Druze are, they're in a tight spot. They don't love the Israelis, but if you get a choice between Al Qaeda and Israel just wants to use you, they want to use you, but they have no plans to kill you outright. Now, maybe some decades in the future, they'll decide that this is part of the greater Israel, and they will start killing you the way they're killing the Palestinians. But at this point, it's probably the best deal for them to take. You can understand why they might say, okay, we'll just have to accept this alliance of some sort with Israel.
It's crazy. So what is al-Jilani's relationship with Israel? Is part of this deal to normalize
Yeah,
relations with Israel, have the Abraham Accords with Syria, and then sanctions are off?
right. Yeah, that's a crazy thing. I mean, that you have all these, you would think that these Takfiris and, the Al Qaeda types and the ISIS types, that they would be mortal enemies of Israel. I think in the long run, that's what they think. But they have made their peace, and it didn't begin with al-Jilani. It was early on in the Syrian civil war that we started hearing reports that the Israelis were actually providing support to al-Nusra, which is Syrian Al Qaeda fighters in southern Syria. They're providing them with medical treatment, for example, and also reports that they were providing them with small arms. This is something that goes back, and of course, the U.S. has done similar things in Afghanistan and other places, and so. Yeah, you have this very strange alliance. Again, that's not new. It goes all the way back to bin Laden, between Western powers and these extreme Takfiris. Again, we're talking about Al Qaeda and ISIS. That's exactly what we're talking about. Who they're supposed to be our mortal enemies, but we just can't resist the temptation to make these alliances with them, alliances of convenience, because it seems like at the end of the day, the people in Washington and Tel Aviv, they're more obsessed with overthrowing these governments that actually resist, have resisted Israel, like Assad's government, and the current Iranian government. I think the reason is, this is the calculation that they're making, is that Al Qaeda, they're a bunch of barbarians. they're good at killing people, but they're not really good at running a society, and they can't really organize a modern military and become a threat to us. I think that's what they figure. Whereas Assad and certainly Iran, that's different. This is an organized modern. These are organized modern societies and militaries, and they present they're real rivals to us, and so they must be taken out. And if we can use the Al Qaeda to do it, so much the better.
Okay. So it's interesting because Syria is supposed to try to normalize relations with Israel, even though that they're Sunni extremists, and Israel is slaughtering Sunni Muslims in Gaza and the West Bank, but
Right.
somehow they're okay with that. But then also at the same time, I'm hearing rumors that Trump is brokering some deal with Saudi Arabia, allowing them to have a civil nuclear program, and it would not come with the strings attached that Saudi Arabia has to normalize relations with Israel, recognize Israel, and back into the Abraham Accord. So it's kind of interesting that you have one, Syria, that has to normalize, and Saudi Arabia saying we won't, and we can still get a nuclear deal, nuclear program. Can you tell me about this? Is this true?
Yeah, it may very well be true. I mean, I've just heard that, I guess they're rumors at this point. I don't know, maybe more than rumors. I could see it happening. It's just that Saudi Arabia, I think, may have been contemplating normalization of relations with Israel prior to October 7th. But because of, what Israel has done since then, it's just impossible. Even if the people at the top just don't really give a damn about the Palestinians. And I think that by and large that's true. Unfortunately, it's true of the leaders of a lot of Sunni regimes. The people on the street, the average people do, and they're furious. And he knows for these monarchs and generals like General El-Sisi, they know that their own positions, are at risk if they go ahead and recognize Israel, without certainly, and allow them to continue what they're doing. So, I could see that Saudi Arabia is going to say no, but Al-Jalani, or Al-Shara, I guess he likes to call himself too now, take your pick. Um, he is in a rather desperate situation. He does have the support from Turkey, but he's being bombed regularly by the Israelis, and the Israelis are taking more and more of his territory, and he really is defenseless. His, that modern military that Syria had has been largely destroyed, and he can't resist them. So he does need the help of the U.S. and he needs peace with Israel. So he's gonna ask for it, which seems rather extraordinary. But yeah, I mean that's a policy that goes back. We all the way back to 2011. We saw that there was this actual alliance of convenience between Israel and the Sunni extremists.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess we'll see how this plays out. I don't know where else Trump has on his tour. I just know he's in Qatar now, but a lot happening in the region, and I don't know. I'm getting a little hopeful that things can work out better in the Middle East, that we could avoid war with Iran. Syria's situation is a massive quagmire. I almost don't like thinking about it because I
Yeah,
just don't.
it's such a tragedy. It's just awful, and it was all unnecessary. And we are, it's not that we are entirely responsible for it, but we contributed greatly to the current situation. Through the sanctions and through seizing of the oil producing and wheat growing regions of Syria. But the one who was, if you're most responsible again for the fall of Assad, was Erdogan.
Yeah, these players are complicated. I did that. I just never understood fully Erdogan's motivations and his ideas with Syria, but I know about creating the Ottoman Empire a bit, but we won't get into that.
Yeah. Well, I think I just to be very brief. Yeah, there is this neo-Ottoman thinking. He wants to expand, Turkey and restore something of its former Ottoman glory. Um, but then also, I think it's clear that he does have an affinity for the Sunni extremists. I think there's no question about that.